Hi, I'm Chris Eggett, the editor of the magazine. Today I'm here to talk to you about a subject very close to my heart, weird games. So, games occupy a weird space anyway most of the time. The themes are often not necessarily directly connected to the mechanics that we play out in our games. But I've picked 5 of my favourite games since last year's show that I've played that I think are worth highlighting to everyone. So without any further ado, I'll get on to some notable mentions. 2 notable additions that don't quite make the list of my top 5 weird games come in the form of, firstly, Rurik, Dawn of Kiev. Rurik is a kind of, it's what's referred to these days as a Waro, which is a war game that's a Euro game. Rurik uses a huge, beautiful map of an area of Eastern Europe that incorporates Estonia and then bits of Ukraine and all sorts in the 10th century. And we play out the various characters of the region at the time. It's a area control game that's all predicated on the concept of using action programming or auction programming. Either way to say it is fine. I don't think anyone said it consistently ever. And this comes in the form of using numbered meeples to declare your actions before you start. Those numbered meeples, they have a better weighting in the actions you want to take with that meeple, but also the heavier they are, the less likely, the further down the chain of events they're going to happen. So while you might get the best kind of movement, that movement is going to be the last thing you're going to do because you used your heaviest 5 meeple. And this is excellent. It's a game that does weird things to your brain because you think you're playing a war game on a board where you're shuffling dudes about. And we all like shuffling dudes on a map. But in reality, you're playing a complex, smart, scheming kind of Euro game that has elements of resource management and other things inside it as well. So, notable mention to Rurik, Dawn of Kiev. The other favourite of mine that didn't quite make the list, but has a similar kind of feel to all these weird games that I like so much, is Pauper's Ladder. So this is by Paul Stapleton, a designer we enjoy working with, and it's a game set in Brighthelm, which is Brighton, more or less, and you wander around trying to become the most virtuous person in the land to fulfill the decree of the Queen, who is to pass soon, to choose her heir. To do this, you wander around just picking up loads and loads and loads of stuff. There's a combat deck, there's about 8 million cards, and the most exciting thing about it is that you wander around with other players playing this game, just changing the world in front of you. You're almost like littering dragons as you go. And in that strange place and this beautifully evocative game with this sort of strange, slightly lumpy art style, you find sort of like a interesting bit of joy. So these are two notable mentions that I just wanted to give a little shout out to, and we'll get on to the rest of the games now. This is Wormlord. This is a action dexterity game that on the surface looks like a children's game, and that is mostly because it is. Underneath the pristine lawn of a children's game, however, is a brutal battle for worm supremacy. Only one of you can be the Wormlord. And to do that, we're going to tie these. These are our worms, these things. And so the way the game works is that you take a worm, this is a worm, and you tie it in a knot, and then you place it on the board. And you've claimed that space. Congratulations, you're well on your way to becoming a Wormlord. And so obviously there is a great deal of conflict in the world of worms, and there only can be one Wormlord. And as such, when you come into conflict with other worms, there's a procedure you have to go through to represent that conflict in this game. Here, for example, I'm about to take this space occupied by this brown worm. But to do that, I must first take the worm, undo the worm, and return it to its owner. before tying my own worm and placing it back on the board. This is enough, stop. Because there's no turns in this game, because it's a free-flowing action dexterity game, you are constantly in conflict with other players. You are constantly removing their worms. You're meant to place them back carefully in front of them. The rulebook says you have to do it nicely, but in reality you're going to be throwing them back at your opponents, and you're going to be taking the worms, throwing them back, and while in that time they've probably already placed another worm somewhere else that's going to be very annoying for you, or they've removed one of your worms already. So it's incredibly chaotic, and the thing it feels most like is like a game of rugby if rugby was just a scrum. If rugby was just people lining up and pushing against each other for as long as a rugby match takes, I don't know, then that is what this game is. It's just that feeling of a war of attrition, push against the other people around you. And as a 4-player game, it's just absolutely chaotic, mad, and frankly, it's probably the sweatiest I've got playing one of these games. It's an intense experience and well worth your time. And it doesn't look, it's made it to the list because it's weird, because it doesn't look like the kind of game that you should be able to derive this much fun out of. It looks like a game that should be a distraction, a nice thing that you spend maybe, your downtime in the evening, or just like a warm-up at the beginning of the evening, if you're doing several things. And the reality is, if you start with this as a warm-up in the middle of your games evening, or the start of your games evening, you are going to be playing a tournament of it well past midnight. So that's Wormlord at number 5. Number 4 is Electric Bastion Land by Chris McDowell, a follow-up to Into the Odd, a small, weird RPG. This is a weird, slightly bigger RPG set in a universe of Bastion, or rather in the city of Bastion, which is a kind of magical realist, kind of weird fiction kind of world. Now, why do we like it? Well, for a start, it has something like 200 pages of character creation that you can roll a dice on. You can roll a D100 and find a character for you anywhere in this book. And the characters you play, they are failed careers. So you don't play a character as such. You play, for example, a fashionista, or rather a failed fashionista. Here, for example, we have a canal nomad. We have a squid bagger. Other things include a living experiment, which is a sort of androidy type thing. There's things like human flotsam, which is just a discarded person. And these are all the strange faces and places that you'll start to meet in this book. The rules itself of the game are super simple, and it's a answer to the question of what if you took out the concept of having to hit something in D&D, because your health points are an abstract representation of your ability to get hit. What if you just took that out and just assumed everything was a hit? Which leads us to the other interesting thing about Electric Bastion Land, which is character progression is all focused on the concept of character change or character growth. So after you sustain massive injuries through your adventures, you then pick up a new trait, a new scar that might improve your health, might improve your life, but probably comes with some kind of feature that debilitates you in some way. So it's an incredibly well-realised world for how little it gives you. Nearly 200 pages of this book is that rolling for character creation there. The rest of the book, if you want to get into it, you can actually just run the game from the back page if you really want. It's all about drawing the city, which uses a London tube map style series of loops. Again, giving us the impression that, or reminds us in fact, that the most important thing about a role-playing game is trying to go somewhere and probably getting there. Knowing that you're going to have to get there in a certain way isn't that important. Knowing that you're going to get there and something will happen along the way is. So it just takes away some of the parts of role-playing that people get hung up on, which is things like the 3D-ness of the world, or veracity, or the fidelity of things, and just focuses in on what's fun, which is obviously conflicts and trying to find treasure to pay off debt that you owe to some nebulous gang, corporation, or family member. It's a beautiful book, and it deserves a place in everyone's library pretty much, and just in terms of the number of ideas contained within it. And so that's Electric Bastion Land at number 4. And number 3 is Tokyo Coin Laundry. This is kind of a hard sell to a lot of people. This is a game primarily, it's got 6 games in the box. Let's start with that. Primarily, the big game in this box is an RPG about being in a Tokyo coin laundry and trying to resolve your mood. You create a character, you enter the laundry, and then you try and do your laundry, despite there being there's one too fewer washing machines and drying machines than you need for the group of people you've got. And then an event happens during the day, and you then eventually leave the laundry, expressing to others whether you're satisfied or not by sharing a platitude. Now, this obviously sounds bonkers, but the point of this game is to bring you to a liminal space. The components themselves as well, they're designed to bring you to a point of pure play, right, where you are, because this is a tiny washing machine, right? This door opens and closes, right? Yeah, they work. There is a pillowcase. There are pairs of socks, and here's a pair of pants. You can put them inside the washing machine. You can close the washing machine, and then you can pretend that the wash has been done. Now, it sounds silly. Ultimately, it sounds silly, but and that's kind of because it is, I guess. And ultimately, you're trying to approach a way of play that isn't about necessarily winning or losing, and is about instead being in a moment and enjoying something simply for the people you're around. It feels, the RPG itself feels contemplative, and you know, if you can't express your mood or get your washing done during one of the 3 days that it happens over, you do feel frustrated by it, and you can examine that in your life and yourself and how that affects your life more generally. It can free you from the concerns that we have playing role-playing games often, that we are somehow trying to win something, roll a dice really high, all that sort of thing, the stats of it, the maths of it, and it's just about the role-play. And it's kind of a ritual thing, and it feels really good if you're with the right people, and you probably are most of the time with the right people. But that's only one of the games, and the reason I think this is so good is because the 6 games in here help you sell that one weird game. The other games include a war game that uses things like these sheets as the distances that the washing machines and dryers can fire. It does things like a washing machine snipe, or a detergent snipe, where you flick these detergents off the machine at your opponents to score hit points. The hit points are measured by the tiny yen coins here. They're put inside the washing machines, and that's how you measure whether one of your washing machines has died or not, basically. Which is just, it feels bizarre, but then actually you play it and you think, that was kind of fun, that was quite good. I quite enjoyed engaging with these components in a way that I wouldn't engage with components in other games. The tactile nature of the game is such that you can you feel yourself losing concerns, being in a moment and letting it all melt away. The solo game, for example, is a simple, very simple push your luck game. You turn cards over and you push your luck until you hit the wrong colour. When you hit the wrong colour, you have a choice. You can load the washing you've already got into the machine, eventually to gain points and gain prizes, or you can decide to discard that item. So, very simple push your luck game, and it's a solo game, and there's nothing that says that you couldn't just pile these things up, or in fact do it on a piece of paper without any of these components. But then you're missing the point of the game, which is that these are transportive items that will take you to a weird contemplative place that you will, I'm not going to say that you're going to learn something about yourself, but you're going to have a positive outcome from having engaged with something so well. So that's Jordan Draper's Tokyo Coin Laundry at number 3. And at number 2 is Dungeon Degenerates. This is created by Sean Orberg and Goblin Co. So this is well, you can tell immediately, this is a acid punk, neon adventure game. And this could have been in other, in the hands of any other artist and game designer. It may have been a generic fantasy adventure. It's incredibly complex. It's got experience systems. It's got a branching kind of choose your own adventure path between missions. It's got a world that fluctuates as you play it. It's got very complex rules, but once you internalize, they sort of become nice and crunchy in a way that you enjoy. But it could have been much more generic. But this here is fabulous. This is a game where flavour is everything. So you are going to be wandering around this world here that I'm unsure if you can really get the depth of it here, because it will probably break the cameras that are being used to film this. It's wildly colourful. Each biome has its own individual ecosystem. Each of these numbers here represents the threat in any given area, or the threat or the doom level, which should be tracked along the top here. And as you move through this world, you will be attempting to put together clues on your adventure. So the first adventure in the booklet is one where you have broken out of this very castle just here, and you have to make the choices about what you're going to do and how you're going to make your way across this map, and where in fact you're going, because the thing is, you're people who are living on outside of society, and this is a society of frogmen, Frankensteins, giant toads, a castle that seems to be walking on legs I can see here, and you're going to wander around and you're going to find not necessarily a home, but you're going to find your sense of purpose in this world. And the way you do that is very much like a dungeon crawling version of something like Final Fantasy, if someone had taken a huge drop of acid first. And so I'd love to explain to you exactly how every piece of this game works, but I would have to refer to the rulebook several times. So instead, what I'm going to say is a few of the minor aspects that I enjoy from this game. The encounters are randomly generated from each of these different biome decks over here. The loot is wild, inventive, and punk. So you will find things in there. There is like a wiener baton, some sort of sausage baton, and it can be used in two ways, because of course it can. One, as an offensive weapon to give you a bonus to your attack rolls, which you do on these colourful dice over here, or you can eat it, for a bit of health back. And it's those kind of like little jokes, and nearly every card, every encounter, you may recognise this character as a homage to Iggy Pop. So there's all these little bits of connective tissue. There's the brawler here, who is a sort of mix of gladiator / professional wrestler. I believe this gentleman is based on Lemmy. There's all sorts of pop culture references that all throw things together. There's also a reference to a 18th century alchemist in the game as well. So the range of things that your brain will pull on as you're playing this game is incredible. So that's loot, that's the world, and then also your characters. Your characters beyond just the ones I've mentioned already. They have various different statistics, very different ways of gaining experience, And at the start of the game, you draw things like weaknesses to like give yourself sort of slightly more flavour as you go through. Because this isn't necessarily a game about getting mighty and beating people up. This is a game about surviving on the fringes for as long as possible and hoping that things are going to turn out good for you. So that's Dungeon Degenerates, that's number 2. Number 1, and this will come as no surprise to anyone who's been reading the mag or listening to the podcast or heard me speak about any kind of RPG at all. Number 1 is Milkborg. Milkborg is a perfect way to introduce someone to an RPG. Sort of. It's a art that is referred to as a blackened art punk RPG. In the OSR tradition, so the old school Renaissance or the old school revival, and it's apart from anything else, a beautifully produced object. And as a game, it's so streamlined, so perfectly pitched that there's really, in my mind, no better way to introduce a group of people to role-playing by playing this game. So, what is it? It's sort of a horror game. It's more like just a metal game. So, in the world of Milkborg, you find yourself as a outcast of society, some kind of terrible human being, more or less, usually. You've probably done something bad at some point, or at worst, or at best, you've been trying to do good things and bad things have been happening around you. So you play as these characters who are not necessarily good people, but probably trying to make their way in the world. And this is a world that's falling apart, that's apocalyptic, not post-apocalyptic, apocalyptic. It hasn't happened yet. It's happening right now, or it's very nearly happening. The world is run by a two-headed basilisk. At the beginning of every session of Milkborg, you are asked to roll a dice. And that dice tells you whether you need to roll on this table here, which is for a misery. And every misery in the world of Milkborg changes the world slightly. And these can be anything from, and that day every father cried, to the trees take up root and attack whoever passes them. And these things obviously affect the game going forward, should that misery be cast. And so you're in a world where every time you play, and you can decide the speed at which dice you roll to generate these things, so you can decide how long your campaign is going to be, more or less. But you know that your campaign is ending with the end of the world. Once you've got 7 minutes miseries accrued throughout the game, the world is over. That's it, and that's the end of the game, the end of your characters. And to be honest, if you made it that far, well done, because most of the time people die horribly. Now, and that's the most fun thing about this, which is your characters are going to have less HP than most of the weapons can do in damage. Your characters are going to have skills that are interesting but easy to implement as a player and as a GM. If you were looking at a way of getting better in the game, the best way for you to get better here is to hope that you're not going to get worse. So if the GM's very nice, they might give them +1 to an attribute of some kind, or you can re-roll your entire health, which, up or down, is going to be an interesting outcome. As a game to run as a GM, Milkborg has pretty much the most flexible system, the most easily picked up series of very simple tropes to riff off. You've seen heavy metal album covers, you pretty much know everything you need to know about the world of Milkborg. There's flavour text in here, there's a tiny bit of art here and there. Not a tiny bit of art, there's loads of art everywhere, but each piece of art tells you enough story for you to go on and make your own adventures. And because it's so stripped back, because it's so simple, in many ways, it gives you such agency as a creator of the world. There's no sense that you're going to do it wrong. You're never going to play this game wrong. Okay, this is a game designed to play down the pub, basically, to have a good time accidentally waking up a room of skeletons. You know, my first game of this that I ever played with a group of people who'd never played an RPG before, and this was my first time actually GMing a game of anything, or maybe my second time. And the first thing they wanted to do, having set the world up for them, is they wanted to pick up one of our other friends and use them as a battering ram to get through a door. A door, I will say, was already open. So that, and didn't feel out of context, or didn't feel out of place or out of anything to do that. And so in that, it supports whatever kind of game you want to play, because it doesn't take itself too seriously. You're just there to have fun. The entire system of the game is run on 2d20s usually, and the players roll. They roll for, because you're usually hitting something, let's be honest. You roll one for themselves and one for the other person, and it's just who hits, then you do the damage. Super simple. There's very little in the way of you need to discover something very difficult, or have moments of inspiration. These can all be played out in the role-playing of the game, and that's the most interesting part of it for me. Plus, there's some great monsters. Milkborg is full of like strange and interesting drawings, and that means that you have strange and interesting characters like these to come up against. And while you could say, Chris, that's just a goblin, I'd say, no, this is not just a goblin, this is a goblin in Milkborg. And the thing about goblins in Milkborg is that if you try and capture a goblin or hang around with a goblin for too long, you too will turn into a goblin. Other exciting monsters in this world, all of which you could easily support anything else, include things like the version of the troll used here, which is a giant creature, obviously, it's a troll, which is a creature that, when confronted, has a very good chance of running away. But every time you damage it, it basically promises to come back. The rules suggest that it will hunt you down and it will get bigger. So every time you fight this creature that likes running away, it's going to come back bigger and scarier. And so what that says is that probably beating this thing to death isn't the answer. So you're asking your players to be more inventive than a normal encounter would be. I think that's what Milkborg comes down to, which is it's a game of really inventive tools for you as a creator or a GM. Even the magic here, for example, full of interesting weird spells, on the previous page, and this is what happens when they go wrong. For example, you would roll a d20 in this case, and if you've got a 3, that would be, your skeleton is possessed by some unearthly force and will do anything to kill you and escape. So if that doesn't sell you on an experience to have a good time with your friends, in a weird world where, frankly, it doesn't matter if your character dies too much because everything's dying. If that doesn't sell it to you, I don't know what will. But this is my number 1 weird game.